Great. Thank you, Denise. And it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here. I was a bench researcher. I still am a scientist, but I was a bench researcher and did my PhD at the University of Washington and my postdoc at Harvard Medical School before I came to pgEd. And I've been in the GSA community for a long, long time. So it's a great pleasure to be here with you all. And I'm trying to share my screen, but the talking and doing technical things. I've lost all the bars. I don't know how many times.
Maybe while you're figuring that out, I'll ask the group that's there. So Marnie, stop me as soon as you have it figured out. Oh, there we go.
I think I do.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I want to actually, in addition to thanking Denise and all our friends at GSA, I want to thank Michelle Markstein, who helped get this program off the ground. I think when she invited me to the Allied Genetics Conference back in May, and we did a session on teaching about the history of eugenics. And I think that was, a really profound moment for me, where I heard a lot of scientists say, I want to be talking about ethical and social issues alongside science in my classroom. Some were already doing it, but there were some who said, I'm looking for the tools, or I'm having trouble. And so it's really exciting to be here with you to both share the work that pgEd does, and also to learn from your experiences. And thank you, Sally, for speaking up. So first, I just want to add a picture to Ting's words that pgEd is really housed within the Department of Genetics at Harvard Medical School. This is an old picture a few years back of Ting's lab, both her wet bench lab and pgEd. pgEd people, our names are written somewhere near our pictures, and not many of us still here because we're all so busy that we don't always come together as much as we would like. But to say that really pgEd, it lives within a science department. Ting
Marnie?
mentioned yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Would it be possible to make it like a presenter mode? So because it's quite small and difficult to read. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So here's Ting's lab, and Ting mentioned our department chair, Cliff Tabin, who's been really wonderful supporter of our work. This is pgEd as we are today. Ting introduced everyone. This was on October 7th when we were celebrating the Nobel Prize for Jennifer and Emmanuel for genome editing technologies, and so a wonderful day for genetics. And hopefully you'll be able to hear from some of my colleagues in a little bit. Like Ting said, we are fundamentally an organization that goes out and talks with people. We meet people where they are, and we talk with them about anything related to genetics that's on their minds. And through those conversations, I have to say that the amount that I have learned could fill volumes. And we have thought about how do we bring these conversations to more people. We've learned a lot about what people want to talk about. And here are some of the topics that people ask us about all the time with 23andMe and direct-to-consumer genetic testing. That, of course, is a common question. For some people, they want to know about how genetic tools can help them have the children that they want. For other people, they're deeply concerned about where genetic technologies are going. And through these different topics, there's an opportunity for people to both see the potential benefits that genetic technologies can bring, but also the challenges, and give them an opportunity to realize, hey, genetics, it actually is something that I can relate to, something that might be important to my life, and that's something that we hope perhaps they feel more comfortable to speak up and ask questions at a moment when genetic technologies may come into their life. So Ting mentioned that we've been thinking about scaling and how do we scale. It's really the number one thing that's been on our mind for years. But one of the ways we realized is, there are teachers in classrooms across this country, around the world, will develop these topics that we know are such vibrant conversation starters in the classroom. We develop them into a curriculum and make them freely available online. And we've been fortunate to work with PBS and WETA with the new documentary, The Gene, I guess new as of April, to then pair our curriculum with a documentary that I think teachers across the country want to use, and to pair the curriculum so that now it lives on PBS Learning Media. I think, Robin, we now are launching a new partnership with WETA. The Finding Your Roots is entering its 7th season, and they've asked us to create companion curriculum for that. And that is certainly a show that has caught a lot of popular attention. So it's a way for these ideas to go out from the lab and into schools. We have amazing teachers. They're having a hard time this year with COVID and teaching students in remote and hybrid models, some in person. Before COVID, we traveled around to meet with teachers, to hold workshops so that they could both learn the content in our lessons and use strategies for having a conversation around the use of genetic technologies. This year, we've moved much more online, and so I think we have now virtually visited. Nadine, do you have the number of states we've visited teachers in this year?
I think it's about 29 off the top of my head. I mean, anybody who can quickly count the blue states here will will figure that out. But I think it's about.
But that we have taken our workshops online and realized how quickly we can connect, at least with some communities, online. And we've at a moment when teachers are looking for just-in-time lesson plans, we are delivering them, snapshots that they can hand to their students who are learning remotely. We think about, we've been thought about beyond the classroom, that so many people, what they know about genetics comes from the television shows they watch and from the movies they see. And, we know that it, carries a lot of weight in terms of what people think and know. At the same time, we see a lot of, genetic technologies that really these storylines that really show the potential catastrophes of how genetics could be used to hurt people. And we've been lucky to work with a couple of organizations, Hollywood Health and Society and the Science and Entertainment Exchange, to bring more of the science that we're interested to share out into the world. When Grey's Anatomy wanted to have a sequencing lab, they didn't know what it looked like, and so we called our friends and Heidi at Partners, Heidi Ream Sequencing Lab, and she took pictures and we sent it over so they can bring more realistic depictions of science to their work. And the next frontiers are to be able to be more proactive, to work with writers and producers who are really known for creating blockbuster films that change people's minds about important issues, and to be able to work with them so that they can bring these difficult issues, as well as the passion that drives scientists to help people and to bring this into their work. We've gone to Washington, D.C. Actually, a few of the people on this call have joined us in D.C., Allison, Dana, maybe a couple others, for series of congressional briefings. When we started this work, we heard that policymakers didn't want to touch the word genetics, that it was too controversial. And so we went to do a program, and they liked it so much that they invited us to do a whole series. So now we've done 6 congressional briefings on different topics related to genetics and genomics. We see Jennifer Doudna here. And, they filled the room. People really have a lot of questions, and the policymakers who are making decisions about how these technologies can and cannot be used, connecting them with people who have information, the facts about how the science works. There's so many opportunities here, both virtually to extend this work, and state level and local policymakers who are making these decisions as well.
And it was bipartisan, right, Marnie?
Mm-hmm.
Bipartisan.
Yep, we had a good mix of people from Republican and Democrat sides of the aisle for these programs. Ting mentioned before Googling schools near me. I guess, Ting, I didn't realize that this was like your common strategy, because for a long time Ting was interested to start conversations with communities of faith where we anticipated potential for great concern about where genetics was going, but also infrastructure for and a depth of trust with communities for reaching those individuals who as Ting and Sally said, can be the hardest to reach. And so one day we did talk, and one day Ting was tired of talking in staff meeting, and she went back to her office and she Googled churches near me. But it was not the first one. She started calling. The first one didn't answer. The second one didn't answer. She called 13 churches. And on the 14th call, someone answered. They had a great conversation, and he invited Ting to come in to participate in the service, and then to meet with some of the parishioners afterwards. Not to tell them, as Ting said, what genetics could do for them, but to answer their questions. And Mohammed on our team, who's not here, is over in this picture. We were having a meeting at Harvard Medical School with a group of Black pastors that was organized by Michael and Shakir, who Ting mentioned, and Mohammed helped do some of the logistics for that meeting. And he said, this was really great. I loved the conversations, but why Christian communities? Why not my Muslim community? And of course, there's no reason why not. And so Mohammed, who's a staff scientist in Ting's lab, began to work part-time with pgEd to help us build those relationships. And here's a meeting we had at Harvard Medical School a year later. And, really, so much is possible from, meeting one person. We had a workshop for teachers in Boston in the summer of 2019, and there's a teacher from the Boston Public Schools who worked with deaf and hard of hearing students. And she said, this was really interesting. These are topics that you talked about are important for my students to know. But your materials will not work for my students. They just won't. She said, but I know a couple people. Those people are Jeannie Reese and Rachel Bowl at the Center for Research and Training at the Learning Center for the Deaf. And they create STEM curriculum in ASL. It turns out that there are no signs in ASL for many of the scientific vocabulary that populates our classrooms: photosynthesis, dominant, recessive, and they are doing fundamental work to create those signs. So as of this week, pgEd has created our first lessons in ASL. It exceeded, I think Dana and I had no idea when we started out everything that would go into creating these pieces, how far off the mark we were, and yet how much was possible. When we met Jeannie and Rachel, they brought in deaf scientists and bioethicists from Gallaudet University as native signing content experts. And, you know, so it really can start from one person. And, you know, we are all people in the world. We have our personal networks, our professional networks. Sally, you talked about the Institute for School Partnerships at WashU, where you, which is how you seed a lot of your school-based work. And it's amazing the doors that can open and the opportunities coming together with the GSA community for going out in your daily lives. You know, there's just so many opportunities. And, you know, we travel, we fly in, we fly out. We always have to go home. It never feels quite right. And we spend a lot of time trying to tailor our materials for the people we're going to be with. You know, you are based, you know, across the United States, maybe around the world, I don't know. And having genetics experts nearby and willing to and excited about learning, you know, through collaboration and two-way conversation, there's so much that's possible.